Welcome back to The Hustle by Hanna. Today I'm with Lisa Wardell, a powerhouse in the business world. Lisa, there are so many things we need to talk about, but maybe we can just start from the beginning. You have an ambitious career, but maybe we can start from some of those first days.
Sounds great. I'm so excited to be here. Hannah, thanks for having me. We're talking about all the things that I love to talk about, so appreciate that. Let's see. I would say I've been working since I was 14. So a lot of my business lessons I learned from really my early kind of resilience and experience just doing the things that young people do, retail and things and waiting tables and things like that.
What are you most proud of today that you think people look past, but it's your journey that has brought you here that you think, I didn't think I could do that when I was younger, but today this is something I'm really proud of?
Yeah, for sure. So I will say that one of the key learnings for me was really understanding that there's not too many things that I can't learn if I put my mind to it and I have what I call learning agility, that I can do it. So as an example, I am the first in my family to graduate from college. I'm first generation, first to go to law school, first to go to business school, and certainly first to be CEO of a company, any kind of company, but in this case, a public company. So I would say that what some people looking at me today and listening to this podcast or looking at my LinkedIn page, et cetera, might think I sort of had this journey and this path and it was linear. It wasn't. I'm most proud of the fact that I was able to build on a bunch of different experiences and really get the confidence in myself that I really could learn anything or do anything. And so that's what I usually work on trying to instill in people when I am mentoring.
And what was that first moment that you said, this is what I'm meant to do? Because like you said, you went to business school, you were a COO, you've been a CEO, you've been aboard of many public companies. And what was that first hustle mentality that really sparked that fire within you?
Yeah, so the first one was really actually early for me. I was a teenager. I was working retail in basically a shoe store, an athletic shoe store, it would be a Champs or a Foot Locker of today. It was called Athlete's Foot. I was sort of learning the basic business of being someone who's, trying to sell shoes and stock the shelves and those kind of things. And what I realized early on is that most people don't ask the question, and this is applicable to right now, so I like to start with this story. Most people don't ask the question, why do we do it this way? And that could be anything. Why do we stock the shelves this way? Why do we open the store this way? Why do we count the money and deposit it in the bank this way? It can be very basic things, but what I have learned, and what I certainly learned first there, is that in lots of different examples and scenarios, the person who knows the most is someone who, is kind of on the sidelines or just observing what's going on. So I'll give you an example. In this particular store, there was a cleaning lady, and she would come in and be cleaning at the end of the shift or the end of the night, right when I was sort of stocking shoes for the next day. And one day she stopped me and she said, why are you stocking them, the same number for every different size shoe? She's like, haven't you noticed that most of the women who come here, like this particular shoe, the shoes that are always out where I'm throwing away the boxes at the end of the day, they're size 7 through size 9. So why are you stocking, 5s and 11s at the same pace? She was the one that was there, to clean and make sure that the store was in good shape the next day. That wasn't something you would naturally say, let me ask that person. But it really changed my life, gave me greater efficiencies. And to this day, when I was a public company CEO and managing across institutions, medical schools, and universities, I always get up, 5 o'clock, go running, and I'll talk to the person who's doing the landscaping or the janitor, because they always know what's going on and they observe things that, frankly, business people kind of look beyond. And so I think if you can get that skill, it can really serve you well as you grow in your career.
Yeah, I think it's the routine aspect and also communicating with all levels and knowing that
Right.
you started from the bottom and you worked your way up, and that's an important tool to use in your skill set and remember where you came from and being able to connect with people at all different levels so they really understand your authentic leadership. And you've had
That's right.
many mentors and you've worked with such great companies. One of the first big career moments for you was at our RLJ companies. Can you share how that early impact of business and mentorship of the mentors around you really shaped your vision for the future?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of minutes on RLJ. It stands for Robert L. Johnson, and that was my boss, Bob Johnson. And some people may or may not know that he started Black Entertainment Television, and then he sold. Actually, he took it public. Didn't like what the market was giving him in terms of valuation. Took that back private, and then sold it to Viacom for north of $3 billion. And this is from,
Wow.
a very early $350,000 loan from John Malone at Liberty Media. So coming a long way. And what he asked me to do was to come on and help him with what he called his second act. Because what he wanted to do was go into businesses where Black and brown people, women, people who are not typically at the top of the corporate ladder had not had access. So a perfect example would be hedge funds, as an example. We started a hedge fund, but lots of other things too, banking, et cetera. And he brought me on, and at the time I had some experience in consulting. I had been to law school and business school. I was really on a great trajectory for my career. But what he really taught me is that it's sort of aligned with why do we do things this way, but it's more you put constraints on yourself. And I remember one time I was telling him, as I liked to do, oh, this is going to be really hard. I don't think we should do this, whatever this was. I don't remember now. But he told me the story. He said, when I started BET, people told me I could not call it Black Entertainment Television. They told me I couldn't trademark Black, I couldn't trademark entertainment, and I couldn't trademark television. They told me that it was too plain and no one would want to make Black Entertainment Television a household name, that I needed something, catchy. But I stuck to my guns and I said, no, this is what I want to call it. This is what we want to do. And today, BET is a household name, and frankly, it still is. And so, in terms of breaking down things and just determining where you are going to push and where you need to listen and take input versus where as an entrepreneur, as someone who is innovative, what you need to do, that really can shape how far you go. Much like you on this podcast, these are the things that people want to hear about. I'm sure there were many people saying, oh, lots of people do podcasts, or, it's not going to be something that people are interested in. It turns out it is. So I think that was one of the best learnings I got from Bob Johnson.
Exactly. Listening to your gut instinct and your intuition and seeing where that leads you, and also surrounding yourself with people who are going to push you and challenge you, but in the best way possible. And for me, it was this podcast, and it was networking and meeting people like yourself and using your experiences to help guide me and my audience. So thank you again for being here. It's really an incredible story to hear about and take your learnings and go forward with those. So I think, many of the people I interview have these aspects of pivoting. You could call them failure. You could call them redirection. What was a moment in your career that you thought, I might have to pivot, but you really stuck with your guns and it led you in a direction that you were excited and happy that you pushed through that moment?
Yeah, and listen, let me just start by saying you're exactly right, but I would go even further and say if you're not failing, or at least learning to fail, or learning how to deal with disappointment, you are not growing in your professional career, right? And you can look at, obviously there's obstacles, and there's things that you have to overcome, but you have to be able to look at them, not sort of everything's rosy by any means. Obviously you have to deal with those things, but you have to be able to look at them and do the forensics around, what did I learn from this? If you can't do that, you're going to continue to come up against obstacles, and in many times the same obstacles, right? So I always say to myself, it's okay if I do it once, or have some, and I'll give you an example here, but it's not okay if I don't learn from that and find myself in the same position. So I'll actually give you an example from Adtalem. Adtalem Global Education today is a powerhouse of medical and healthcare education. They educate the most nurses, most physician assistants, physicians, family nurse practitioners, etc., than any other group of institutions in the country each and every year. And they go on to take residencies and run hospital systems all over the country. So it's a great organization. When I came on as CEO of Adtalem, there were a lot of challenges. And one of the things that was very frustrating at the time was the regulatory stranglehold on the industry. So Adtalem is for-profit education. Many people remember that, particularly a couple of administrations ago, it was really getting a bad name because there were bad actions in the industry, if not bad actors, and people weren't really making sure that students got a return on their investment. And when I came in, instead of saying, regulatory, they're picking on us, that's bad, what I did was I said, I've got to, and we have to come up with our own set of commitments that we're going to give to students and therefore to the country. Because after all, it's taxpayers' dollars that people are borrowing to go to school. And we did that. And we said, we're going to make sure that our graduates get the right kind of training and they actually graduate. Because the issue with student debt isn't people are graduating and getting jobs and not paying their loans. It's that they're not finishing their education and therefore ending up with loans and no degree. And so we sort of attacked that. But along the way, I definitely made some mistakes. I really felt that that everybody would understand sort of the greater good, and that we would not have to fight so hard with individuals, whether a lot of them were regulators and congressmen and women, et cetera, who just kind of had a thought in their mind and really felt like it was a bad industry. And so we had to stop and start several times in terms of how are we going to tell this story, but then also how are we going to look inside ourselves as an organization and overcome this thought that, we can do no wrong, and determine what it is we need to do better. And as a result of that, we put in way more services for students. We helped them with testing and making sure that they got residencies and clinicals where they needed to get them, and really did a lot with our procedures. But it was a very long journey, and if you don't remind yourself every day that there's like a greater reason for this, which is why people have to work in an area where they feel a passion for the industry and for the people, it can get really, really tough.
How did you manage a company of that size? Because you had so many different levels, and you can bring experience and skills from business or law school, but it's really a unique skill to be able to, like you said, transform that vision, and you're passionate about it, but how does one go about doing something like that?
Yeah, so I always really boil it down, and I think you can do this in your personal life and your professional life, but to 2 or 3 really key components at the end of the day. And then you can sort of test this and say, well, what about this? And I'll tell you how it falls into one of these 3 things, right?
The secret sauce.
There you go, the secret sauce. So one is you have to be able to make connections for all of the people in the organization between what they do on a day-to-day basis and what that means for the strategy and the success of the company. Now, If you are a P&L leader and you run one of the business units, it's really easy for me to say, well, Hannah, what you do every day, right? You're bringing in students and you're bringing in revenue and you're making sure that they get all of the academics they need. You're managing your costs, and that's what you do for our strategy, which is to make students successful and for us to be profitable. But if I said the same thing and you were the janitor in one of our medical schools and your job was to make sure all the bathrooms were clean and that kind of thing, how would I have that same conversation? And a leader is able to say, this is important because we need to show our students and our faculty and all of our stakeholders and our staff, frankly, that we care about them and that their well-being and cleanliness and safetyness, it could be a security guard, it could be anybody, is important to us. It's not about are we making the profits and the returns only. It's about how do we make our environment safe and inviting for everybody that's there. So when they come and they see the beautiful flowers or they see the pristine, clean bathrooms, people understand that we care about our community. That is the same message for two very different people, and true leaders can make those connections. The second thing is you have to trust your leadership. You don't get to decide whether you're going to be whether you're going to delegate or not as a CEO because you have no choice. You simply cannot do it all yourself. What that means is you have to trust your leadership team and they have to trust each other. And if you don't have the right people in the seats, you learn very quickly that you're responsible for what they don't deliver on. And so you've got to make sure you've got the right team. Sometimes it's a question of not having people in the right seats, but more often than not, you can't play musical chairs and you need to bring in people who you're going to be able to trust in those leadership positions. So once you've made the connections and you have leadership that you trust, that you can work with, when you think about we had 14,000 employees, right?
Wow.
I can't talk to all of those people personally. Mm-hmm. So what you have to do is you have to get everybody in the organization to believe in themselves as part of the company, the vision of the company as part of the DNA of that organization, so that yes, of course, you're looking for your supervisor, you're looking for your business unit leader to give direction and to be leaders. But at the end of the day, everybody needs to understand they have a sphere of influence. And if they don't believe that Adtalem, in this case, or your team at the podcast, in your case, are doing the very best and going to produce an amazing outcome and product. In our case, the students were our product. It's not going to roll all the way down the organization. So you need a tone at the top, but you also need to make sure that you understand what the echo at the bottom is and how you keep those aligned. If you do those three things, most other things fall into place.
Well, it's your vision and it's the authenticity of people seeing that. And like you said, you can't touch 14,000 people, but you can give the leaders in each of the fields the power to make an impact in their respective departments. Mm-hmm. And I think other people who are leading companies, teams, however big or however small, are able to have a similar impact because of seeing someone like yourself.
Well, that's right. It really doesn't matter. That's a lot of employees. But for example, I sit on the board of American Express. American Express has, 10 times those employees. Mm-hmm. Exact same principles in terms of, does everybody in that organization understand where they fit and that they are integral to what American Express does for their customers and then for the countries that they serve globally, which is most of them. So I agree. You can use that whether you've got 6 employees, 600, 6,000.
And maybe you can talk about that pivot from your previous role as CEO to being on the board of American Express, because that is a very well-known name, and there's different visions that I think people externally think about American Express, but you're working on the inside now and helping lead and being on the board of a company like that. What's that experience like?
Yeah, so first let me just take a step back and say, because I talk to people a lot about being on boards, whether they're public, private, nonprofit, et cetera, and people will ask me, how do you determine what's a good board to be on. And I think about it this way. There's sort of three things that you look at. And for me, if two of the three are positive and exciting, then that's something that you should look at as a board role, obviously if you have time and capacity. So the first is the actual strategy and vision of the company. Is this a company that you can align with? Is this a company that would make you proud if you were, telling your, great grandma who really doesn't care about, profitability, but cares about, are they doing the right thing? Would that make you proud? And is it a strategy that you understand and innately think is a good one? The second is the CEO. A board's number one job is to support the CEO 100% until such time as the board thinks that they don't have the right CEO, and then their number one job is CEO succession. And in fact, CEO succession happens, it should happen all the time as a routine as you're developing people in the organization. But you've got to be aligned with the CEO. You can't say, well, I like the strategy, but I don't think the CEO is the right person to drive that change in the organization. And then the third is the other board members. Are they people that you have something to offer to, but that you can also learn from? And again, this doesn't have to be a big Fortune 200 company. That's the same. I'm on a nonprofit board. I had the same exact criteria. So for me, I met the CEO. I interviewed with the CEO of American Express, Steve Squeri, and I could tell immediately that he was somebody that I could learn from. You had mentioned before that I had experience from very young age, sort of working for Steve Squeri. He grew up in American Express. He had done almost every job in that company. So he really understands the ins and outs of what makes American Express great, and I wanted to learn from that. And then secondly, the strategy and the vision as I think about American Express, and it's not just a card company, but it's an experience company, and thinking about how that brand can drive experience, especially when we talk about Gen Z and now Gen A, really, and millennials to a certain extent.
I haven't heard that one. Gen A?
Gen A. Well, my daughter's Gen A. So it's 2013 and on. They're coming. They're certainly spending their worth in the beauty industry. I can tell you that from like 8 years old. So wow. Yeah, they started in 2013. But obviously they don't have American Express cards yet. But again, the vision for what does it look like 5 and 10 years from now, and what do we need to do? And your generation, people who are doing the types of things that you're doing and are your age and experience level, like you guys want to discover and experience and travel, and it's not just about like what do I have and where does it fit in. And I love that because it's so exciting, and American Express can really help me kind of stay relevant on that. And I think I bring a lot to the board because I've got a lot of experience in some of the things that they're dealing with now, whether that's cyber or financial crime or anything like that. I've managed that before.
Do you think a lot of those principles too, because there's very few people that will be in your position to be on a board of this caliber, but you think when a young person is joining a new company, they could apply similar principles to looking at the CEO's vision, maybe instead of their board members, it's their coworkers, and maybe instead of it's the vision or the skills that they bring, but it's the upskilling that can occur at a new company when they join it as well.
Absolutely, no question. So we've all met that person who, you can just tell they're really excited about what they do. And they're like, let me tell you, what happened at the retreat, or let me tell you what happened with my group or my team meeting. And the reason for that usually is because the organization is aligned around a common goal, and they find that goal and that mission exciting. So that doesn't matter. That can be, 4 people. I've listened to pitches in private equity and even VC where, folks are just starting up, but they're thinking big. I can't stress enough the criticality of thinking big and thinking long term when you start new things that they don't start big, but nobody did.
Do you think for an entrepreneur who's pitching, because I'm sure you've heard many pitches, do you think
Yes.
the vision or the fundamentals or the balance of the two, what's more important today? Because everyone has these tools to grow, but it's the vision and the execution that really allows them to take a step forward.
Great question. And I'm so glad you raised it, because I was thinking about this the other day, because in one way, when we think about particularly AI in, Copilot and other things in presenting or preparing presentations and financial models and things like that, it's really democratized the that part of the pitch, right? Because before you would have to pay someone and, really put out some expense to get the right model and the right presentation. And regardless of what people say, if something is presented very well and very professionally, there's a benefit to that. Now you could do all of that yourself, as an individual entrepreneur, as a small team. So what that means is actual investors have more time and ability and capacity to focus on two things. At least that's what I would say, and I would pressure test this with other potential investors. But two things. One is the management team, and by that, obviously as a startup, you're not going to have everything built out. But what you need is people who, again, believe in the mission, but then also have what I call, people kind of used to call it resiliency. People use that word. It's a little overused, but I would say it's a different word, which is learning agility. Right. So everything that you and I know right now about, let's use AI as an example, AI use cases for business, whether that's on the cost side or the revenue side, all of that in 3 years will be completely different.
I would even say shorter period than that.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to be nice with 3 years. So what that means is, right, if you and I are people who are keeping up to date and learning not just the basics. Okay, do I know what AI is and ML and deep learning as a subset of ML, and do I understand the different types of models and what prompts mean and how I can get different outputs based on my prompt, et cetera, and how many different models there are there, and which ones are better for text, or assuming we know all of that, the question is not. Doesn't stop there. The question is, do I have the ability, capacity, and the desire to continue to learn? And that's how people are going to start choosing folks, right? So the learning agility, but then also it's, the things. What I tell people all the time, especially people who are coming to me and saying, my son just graduated from St. Andrews, so undergrad, thank you. So, a lot of his friends, well, should I get a law degree? Should I get a business degree? Are they going to be worth anything? What will I do? And the question is really, one is, entrepreneurship is more critical and a better pathway, I think, than ever before. Two is, what is it that just maybe everything can be replicated in the future by machines, but what is it that can't be taught even in humans? Being persuasive, having humility, being able to listen, have empathetic listening, trusting your leadership, those types of things. That's where, we don't really call it soft skills anymore, but those are the critical skills that people are going to need. And that's what I tell them. I'm like, you should test and learn and figure out what you like while developing those muscles, because that's muscle memory that can't be taken away from you. And that's what investors are looking for today.
I completely agree. I think I have a lot of interns that I help mentor as well, and they always ask me, what's the industry I should go into? And I often say that tech is changing and you should learn these AI skills, but like you said, it's the ability to learn that the AI skill today is going to change, and how do you learn that next week and the week after that and the year after that, because
that's right.
It's changing much quicker than...
Right. Think about the developer and coder paths. Obviously, we still need them, but they're very different to what they before. AI can code. It can code. So That has changed, and that's what we need to that's what we need to be able to pivot to. I mean, ultimately, I am, there's sort of the bulls and the bears when it comes to AI, or the opportunistic sort of utopian and then the dystopia. I'm on the utopian side because I believe that there's so many things we can embrace as opportunities, but also when we talk about the workforce, I know that was one of the things that you're very focused on. What does the workforce look like, and how's it going to change? I'm hoping that what it will do is balance those professions that we simply, undervalue right now: home caregivers, kindergarten teachers, that kind of thing, and allow them to make more and do less very repetitive tasks. I mean, yes, will we have AI in the classroom? Yes. Can the AI, teach a 5-year-old how to to do their shoelaces and give them a hug when their dad leaves them at the door and they don't want to go to school? No, of course not. And so I think that's the challenge that we have as a people, as a population, to figure out.
And I think it's giving the workforce the ability today to upskill independently, and then also with government help and with the help of companies upskilling their own workers, teaching them to grow in these industries that they never thought they could get into.
Yes,
so
agreed.
Anyone can become an entrepreneur, but if you want to focus on a specific industry, you can also grow into that because you now have the ability to learn it beforehand. And it's democratized, like you said.
I completely agree. I mean, let's take AI as an example. That's a perfect example. So I spent obviously it's been around since the 50s and 60s, but let's just say ChatGPT is what got us all like, ooh, what's going on here, right?
Yes.
And I would say like the first, 9 months, I was like, okay, whatever, I'll kind of figure out what it is. And then I realized I need to know this. I went out, I did the research. I found 70 different free classes that you can audit. I mean, obviously, if you want the certifications or something like that on Coursera or something like that, because you want to use it for your career, you can. But if not, there's at least 70, and this was a couple months ago, that you can take. And I just started taking these classes. I took the IBM class, I took the Microsoft class. I mean, it's all out there for us if we want to use it. That did not used to be the case. Information scarcity is what gave some people the ability to do well and become wealthy and start businesses, and some people not. That's not there anymore. I mean, I don't mean that there's not any challenges out there, but certainly it's been democratized in a way that we haven't seen before, certainly in my lifetime.
Exactly. Something that I stress often to everyone around me is take an hour out of your day and just try to learn and play around and experiment with it. Because like we said before, it's changing day by day. And with all of the focus on AI, you need to be able to learn these skills. And it's simple to be interested, but to actually listen and apply those there's still a learning curve that I think you just have to try, and you're going to make mistakes, but you're going to do better because you have a little bit of that extra toolkit.
I completely agree. And I would just say you are clearly someone who is extremely motivated and disciplined. So you say an hour. One of the things that I would recommend.
Platforms, though, because I could be on TikTok, I could be on Instagram.
Right. No, all I was going to say was I would highly recommend, I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's a book called The 530 Club. Okay. And the whole premise is that, and people can look it up and take a look, or you could just read the summary or listen to the summary on Blinkist or some kind of app like that. But the whole premise is a 20-20-20. So you take the first hour. You're supposed to get up at 5. I think I'm in the 5:30 or 6 a.m. club because I do it around 5:30. But 20 minutes of exercise, 20 minutes of meditation or prayer, or whatever you use to sort of center yourself, and 20 minutes to learn something new. And so that's where I started using my 20 minutes on AI, but 20 minutes a day, on actually the lessons and classes versus, of course, we're all using AI when we're on our smartphones. You can really learn a lot, and you're getting the latest. To your point, I think that is the piece that people need to understand: the speed of change. I'm very used to it because the education industry is one of the industries that is changing so fast and has been changing for a while. So as a CEO, I had to get used to the constant, changes in and around both education and the healthcare system, because those industries have been faster to adopt AI solutions because they've had to. Anyone that uses healthcare, particularly in our country, between payers and providers, insurance companies, et cetera, know that we've got some things that we can improve, and that's happening slowly.
Yes, I've heard something similar, and that reminded me of a different podcast I was listening to. It was, a doctor alone is an amazing life-saving tool, or a person who can have these tools. A doctor plus AI is going to expand beyond what we know, but you can't isolate the two because they're not going to get as far together. So it's, at first people oppose and they fear tools, but then when you adapt and you learn and grow with 1 + 1 = 3, then we're all much better off. And of course, there's the issues that we have with security and privacy, what's feeding into these models. There are many, many issues and questions around that, but understanding how we can use these tools to our advantage to help greater society be more productive, enjoy the things that we enjoy, and then also curing medical diseases that we didn't even think were possible is now happening because of this extra toolkit. So it's an amazing tool to have and grow with.
Well, absolutely. And look, in healthcare, there are obviously a lot of efficiency applications, but really, as I listen to people and read on this, the biggest sort of benefit here is the drug trials and the clinical trials and just the time, right? If you think of how much data and large data an AI model can process, and being able to, we saw it a little bit with vaccines starting, in COVID in terms of the speed, but if these machines can rapidly reduce the amount of time that drugs need to be in testing, and sort of have much faster test and learn profile, it's going to be really beneficial for society, right? Particularly when you start talking about Alzheimer's and dementia and other things, that if we can detect them not 2 months earlier, but decades earlier, and change patterns of people's behavior or whatever it is that needs to happen, that's going to be very significant for us.
It's an exciting time.
Yeah.
I don't even think we can comprehend how things will change. What do you think is one of the most interesting use cases of AI, or even AI plus a new innovation that's come from that you've seen in your own career in the last few years?
Yeah, so I'll start. I'll do one healthcare, one education. I'll start with education, and that industry is actually moving quite fast. I would say maybe a little more or faster in for-profit, but now we see all of academia, and the reason for that is sort of an underlying premise that we've always known. We just haven't known how to attack it, which is simply that people learn differently, right? And that we have not cracked the code of teaching what people know to need to actually truly learn. So actually, as a matter of fact, just yesterday, there was a big announcement between OpenAI and Canvas. Canvas is a big learning management system that is across many, many areas of academia, from K through 12, university systems, et cetera. And if you're not in education, you can think about it the same way that you would think about a CRM. So a customer relationship management tool, similar, but here it's our learning management system and how our students learning and faculty interacting with students, whether that's online or on-site or hybrid. So that's Canvas. And I think that those types of companies in the ed tech that is driving solutions that allow us to do both predictive AI learning as well as Gen AI learning that ultimately provides new data because of a way that a student learns is going to be helpful. So it used to be, if you take, let's say, nursing and you're trying to learn anatomy, it used to be two things. One, you are learning from a textbook. I love books. I love to highlight them, so I'm not downing books, but you're learning from something static, and you do that for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then you shift from that to a model, but it's static. It can't do anything with it, and then you're expected to do this in a clinical setting and have actual human beings. Now today, there's a couple of things that AI does. The first is it has very, very sophisticated 3D models. So think of like a huge iPad, and in that you can literally use the computer to, cut a body horizontal or vertical. You can see all of the structures, whether that's your blood and veins, it's your skeletal system, it's your muscular system, and all of a sudden, we used to teach those in components. First, you learn about the bones, then you learn. Now we're able to teach how those things interact. Right? That was not possible to this level prior to AI. And then what we can do, and what we do is have very sophisticated simulation labs. I mean, we have models, or we call them dummies, but models now, like the dummies in the car crash things. Yeah. But these, Noelle can have a baby and does every single day when the students come in. We have people literally, they're on machines and you do the wrong thing and they can, go into cardiac arrest, and, everyone has their role. And so you're really in a situation where you're becoming a day one ready nurse or doctor in our case. That just wouldn't be, you just can't do that with humans in any country, I don't think, but definitely not this one. And so I think those use cases bring to life. And then at the same time, remember I mentioned before, the predictive AI piece. So I might really understand, how the muscles go together, or I get that, but I'm having a hard time with the heart. So don't, in the different verticals and aorta and how does the blood flow and those kind of things. So don't give me 50%, skeletal and 50% heart on my homework. Give me all the stuff I didn't do. And if you're the opposite, it can come back and it's going to give you the questions you're having trouble with. Why would you do the questions I'm having trouble with if you've already mastered that material? It sounds really simple. That was not in existence even 2-3 years ago to the level that it is today. And students are benefiting from that. They're getting through things faster. They are retaining more knowledge, and they're
contrary to a lot of popular belief that
That's right.
I listened to this other quote yesterday. It was Socrates opposed writing because he said it was bad for memory, and people today oppose AI because of critical thinking. But if you look at things in a box, of course, you're going to have a minimizing and a maximizing, but in the middle, You're going to have this growth to work through. And
I hadn't heard that Socrates quote. That's a great one to use.
It's crazy if you think about it, because everyone would be illiterate if we didn't learn to write. But being able to, maybe you lose a little bit of your memory because you're not speaking it, but you're gaining so much more because now we can speak and we have communication, and AI is another form of communication that it's clear you're able to use these tools, and you've surrounded yourself with people who push you to do better, and you have the curiosity to learn, which is something of, you want to hire an entrepreneur or fund a business because the founder has that mentality. You clearly have that mentality as well. And so it's an important time to look, hey, it's challenging, it's scary, but it's also eye-opening, and we're increasing our ability to learn. Like all of these industries.
Absolutely. I couldn't put it better myself. I completely agree. And I also think, I understand that there's people, particularly in corporate America now, or even the big investment firms who've been in corporate America for 20, 30 years now, right? And things were done a certain way, and that was very hierarchical, and you sort of learned. And I'm very much for the apprentice type example or relationship or experience, because I think you do learn by doing and from seeing other people learn. So I agree with that. But what I think they're missing is that we have an opportunity now to really level the playing field, right? From those who have been working for a really long time, those who are just getting into the workforce, and what are the things that we can bring as more seasoned executives. I'm trying not to use old on the podcast. More seasoned executives. Expert. There you go. About what you can't learn or what, because I think the big, leaving aside hallucinations, I think the big gaps in AI, right, is more, where does somebody not have experience where they would understand or know what to ask the model? It's much like any other kind of analytical or Socratic thinking. Like, what are the pieces I don't know that I don't know? That's where people who have experience can come in and help people to really navigate what does that look like, in a prompt, and you can get the machine to do that. When I do a prompt now, I always say, ask me questions up to a maximum of 3 or 5 or whatever, however complex the issue is, questions that will help you better understand the output that I'm looking for in this particular query. I didn't know to do that before. I took a whole
That's a great tip. I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And it will ask you and interact, and you'll get a much more thorough response from your prompt.
I think there's a lot of fear because there are jobs that are being taken because of AI, but the jobs that are being created from these new roles, at least in the I can't speak in the long term if we have robots replacing us, but in the meantime, I think there's a lot of jobs that will be created if you learn the skills and can teach others and communicate that. So a traditional consultant might be, I don't want to use the word out, but they might be out, and a AI operator, an AI expert. There's so much room for young people you don't even have to be young, for those who are curious and ready to learn, to teach others about how to better use a prompt, like you said, or use these tools to help these traditional businesses grow and become more modern.
I completely agree. And look, one of the myths I would love to debunk on this particular podcast is we hear, there's no question the job market's going to change. There will be jobs that no longer exist. But guess what? 50% of the jobs today did not exist 7 years ago here. They were different jobs. So jobs have been changing. It's just that people are really driving on that fear. But here's the myth. Because people who have been in business for a really long time, or law is a perfect example. I'm a reformed lawyer, but went through law school, did all of that. And because they spent hours and hours and hours, depending on when they came out, either at the library actually pulling references, or on LexisNexis at the time, actually going through references, or as a consultant, actually moving logos on a PowerPoint and typing in the topic sentence, hours and hours and hours. Now it's somehow become, in retrospect, this wonderful time of learning. No, it was a complete waste of time. Waste of time. And we could have been doing lots of other really productive things, right? And so to me, I'm like, embrace that, and it's great. I have a 24-year-old son and a 22-year-old son. It's great that they don't have to do that. They can use their time really figuring out, how can I be of value to this client if they're a consultant, or to this legal client if I'm a young legal associate. And I have a huge gap, and I also have a 12-year-old daughter. And when she's 24, nothing that her brothers Andre and Isaac are doing now or will do in the next 3 to 5 years of their career will be the same. And
but what a great opportunity, right?
Yeah. That's right. And so the challenge is, do we have people who are confident enough in themselves and their skills, and their intellect and their EQ and their IQ and all of those things, to see opportunities in that? Because there will be big winners who understand what this really can do, particularly in healthcare, like I said, education, drug development, those types of areas.
I think that's great. One last question before we get to the rapid fire round. I did want to ask you, and maybe you say this to your daughter, but what would you tell your younger self going into this new age, this new world, if she was starting out today? So maybe that would be more of your sons going into.
Yeah, okay, I'll take Isaac, who just graduated.
Yes.
So I would say embrace everything about what you do and what you can do that has to do with creativity. Because that's something that cannot be displaced. And when I say creativity, I don't necessarily, he actually can draw and paint, but I don't mean like necessarily just an artist. That is creative, but I mean what you're doing. I'm coming up with a podcast that's named after me, that I'm going to get all of this amazing content. That's creative too. So I mean across creative. So find the things about you that you like that are creative. Find a mentor who has experience sort of in the old world from a business perspective, if you will, and ask them to help you with the things that you're not going to get, and then dive in to AI and make sure that you really understand what it means, and the use cases across several different industries. And then the third is just this hasn't changed, but you are much more able to do it now than we were, which is find something you love, do something that is important to you, because you have an economy now where it's the norm that people have a side hustle. It's the norm that I told him you could go online and you could tutor someone in English who's sitting in name your country. There's 195 of them, 197 with the Vatican, and make money doing that, and then you can start a farm. You can the opportunity is so much bigger. And I think the fourth thing is there is something to be said for actual physical travel, like travel globally and go somewhere else, live somewhere else, because it's very different all around the world, and it don't allow the internet to become your physical experience just because you can go on and see what it looks like everywhere, because it's different being there in person. I think that's what I would
That's a great piece of advice, because you're right. You could sit at your desk and stare at your computer or your TV and say, I know so much, I've seen so much, but you really haven't. And you need to interact with people. That's never going to go away. And it's important to remember that, because it's not easy, and the more you do it, the more interested you become and the more curious you are. So
you're exactly right. Yep.
Very important.
That's right.
Okay, so now we will do a few rapid fire questions. Okay. And you've touched on this a little bit, but what is one myth about leadership that you want to debunk?
One myth about leadership is that you have to take a certain path, and that you have to have a certain education to be successful. The way to be successful as a leader is to be humble enough to know what you don't know, and most other things will fall into place.
Love that. The best piece of advice you've ever received? It's a tough one.
It is. The best piece of advice I've ever received, I would say, actually was from my dad. So I mean, it's a little cliche to go with mom or dad, but it was from my dad. And what my dad said to me is, and he said it more than once, but what my dad said to me is, think about whenever you're in this. I was in a very tough. I can't remember what it was, so it couldn't have been too tough, but a very tough decision. I was a CEO, and he said, I want you to think about if you went to the doctor today and the doctor said, you 100% have 3 months to live, would this still be important, and would you do something different tomorrow than what you're going to do if that's not the case? And obviously, usually, it's very different, and it is called a really deep shock of putting yourself back into having perspective. And I think we all need to do that so much, particularly given the environment we live in today.
Perspective, exactly. What is one risk you're incredibly glad that you took?
Let's see. I would say quitting my consulting job. I work for a top consulting firm out of business school, quitting that job to go to a venture fund, which was my job before I went to RLJ, which had literally, I think I was the sixth employee. And I was there for 3 years, and I learned more in that 3 years than probably everything I'd done before that, including school.
I love that so much. One book or resource you think every leader must consume?
Can I
You
do
gave a
two?
great book, yes, and you gave a great book before it too.
Okay, so one that so the way I take that test is if I reread it, because I read a lot. So one is Winner's Dream, which is a book by Bill McDermott, who's the CEO of ServiceNow. And that book, everyone should read. One, he's a fantastic leader, and it very much is coming from working class family to being CEO of a gazillion-dollar company. But it is just full of lessons. So one is Bill's book. I don't know if he has more than one book, but this one is called Winner's Dream. And the second is called Leadership Agility by Bill Joyner. I think there might be another author, but Leadership Agility. I think it's the second book. I think the first one was called Art of Leadership or something like that. But this book is it's kind of what we're doing today. It's like cutting through the noise to get to the point. Like, what do you really need to know and do and have to be effective as a leader? Those are the two that I would suggest.
I have noted those, and we'll definitely read those. And finally, in your own words, what does the hustle mean to you?
The hustle means to me, get rid of dream killers and take action.
Straight to the point and exactly what people need to hear today. So thank you for being on The Hustle by Hanna. This was an incredible story, background, and tips to stay agile in a new age and inspired to take on those challenges and go forth into a new world. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Hannah. It was great.